We'll see if he wants to come in after we're done here. So, thank you. Let me share my screen here. All right. So obviously, kind of yearly, we like to try to give an update on where we're at with our natural resources program, kind of update numbers, and kind of talk about what's coming up, what happened this year, that kind of stuff. Obviously, it was a very interesting year for us. We were still able to do quite a few events with some social distancing practices and masks and things like that. So we'll kind of talk through some of this. Some of this is review for some of the commissioners that have been around for a while. I know this was in your packet. I'll go through some of these things kind of quick on how we go about this.
Jim, do you have the ability to expand it? And I don't believe it's just me because I've gone, or when Lonnie did something, we went full screen, but I'm only seeing half screen per se.
Display settings, yeah.
So I presume everybody else is seeing a lot of black screen as well.
Yeah, it's the presenter. We're seeing the presenter view and not the slideshow.
That better?
Much better.
Much.
Right.
Thank you.
Our vision always is volunteer staff and consultants working together to accomplish our goals. One of the things we wanted to focus on this year is expanding beyond those third Saturday events to really try to offset what we were seeing from what we get done with our consultants. And then we want to implement our plan structure. So some 2020 accomplishments. We did increase the number of volunteer-led activities throughout the city. We did establish protocols and process to empower our volunteer leaders to be successful. Kind of move that to the top. We were successful events during COVID-19. That's something I think we're pretty proud of, that we found a way to be able to still do some of these things. And then we did implement a quarterly communications newsletter. So quarterly, we've been putting out things that what happened for the last quarter and what's happening in the next quarter, and just kind of keeping everybody up to date. So 2021 opportunities that we need to kind of continue to work on. We want to do some continued training for our volunteer leaders. They're doing pretty good, learning some of the things that we're doing, but we kind of want to move to the next level on that. We always are trying to identify and recruit additional leadership. We were able to get some new faces this year, and we'll talk about that here in a second, which are only going to benefit our program moving forward. We want to further our annual work plans with volunteers. So one of the things that we really want to work on this year is lay out the Stantec plan quarterly or bi-yearly or however it might be, and then add in our volunteer-led events that work in kind of concert with what we're doing from a Stantec standpoint. So our volunteer, when we have volunteer programs, our natural resource volunteers are categorized into two categories. One is kind of our general, that's our third Saturday events, and then there's our volunteer-led events. In addition, we count our volunteer and natural resources numbers along with the green team, our Arboretum volunteers, our adoptive park volunteers. We do have some community service volunteers that come in over time, and then obviously we do quite a few Eagle Scout projects a year. So how does a project get brought forward? So there's a couple different ways. We're approached by a volunteer leader, captain. One of our volunteer leaders will call me and say, hey, I have this going, I see this in Central Park. Can we go do some of this this weekend? And we kind of use our resources to help get volunteers out at that. Sometimes we get a call from a resident in an area, and it's resident driven. Sometimes it's staff driven. It's something we see out in the parks or out in some of our open spaces to kind of talk about things that we need to work on. And then a lot of times it's plan driven. It's part of our overall natural resources master plan. So here's our hours for this year. We did have 355 hours in our third Saturday events. We had 154-hour volunteer-led events. I think that number is probably a little bit higher. We don't always get some of the reporting from some of those volunteer-led events. That's one of the things we're going to try to implement to make sure that we get a little more accurate number on that. We have 346 hours in our Arboretum program, our kind of green team, our days out at the Arboretum that we had help, then the 88 hours in the orchard. So that was 943 total hours, a little lower than last year, but we had more total shifts, and we also had more unduplicated volunteer numbers. That's actual individuals that are involved in our program now over last year. So we did miss a couple events due to COVID, as some of the Department of Health guidelines came through. We had to cancel a couple events here and there that we just didn't think we could operate safely. That's probably part of the reduction in numbers. So some of the Arboretum program highlights is we did hold a socially distant recognition event. One of the things we're pretty proud of is we planted the orchard a couple years ago with the hope that we would start producing crop for the community. And we're starting to see some of that. So we did donate over 100 pounds of apples to every meal. No apples were wasted this year. The leftover fall apples were made into apple butter by Patty Sullivan and Rachel Boggs. And we were given to volunteers as part of our thank you to them. And then fresh herbs, cucumbers, tomatoes, beans, and other small crops were available to Roseville residents daily throughout the summer. Some of our natural resources program highlights, and I'll kind of skim over these. I know these were in your packet. So we had new initial invasive brush management. We did do some prescribed burns in Central Park, lots of spot treatment in areas that we've already been to. We did hit all 22 parks that are part of our natural resources plan as part of that. Installed the native flower and sedge plugs at Villa Park. Did some foliar treatments of invasive, non-invasive, non-native brush. We did some follow-up cut treat of invasive at Langton Lake. We continued thinning some of the invasives on the north shore of Bennett Lake. And then we did lots of supplemental seeding, primarily around Bennett Lake, where we've done some removals as of late. 2020 events, we were able to hold our bigger events this year. Again, something we're very happy we were able to do. We were able to get Flower Power in, which is always one of those great iconic things for the city. And then we did do this year a tree planting event. So we were able to, in the fall, it was actually going to be in the spring. It was canceled in the spring, moved to the fall. We planted over 100 trees with our volunteers in just about an hour and a half throughout the system. And another cool thing about that, and we'll talk a little bit more about the tree planting in my next presentation when we get into EAB and some of the forestry stuff, but we did have 19 new volunteers for that event. So obviously those are the kind of things that are bringing in additional volunteers that we now get into our volunteer pool moving forward. So some upcoming events. I'm still listing the 18th as our planning day at Cedar Home. If we cannot do the planning event, we are going to come up with a service day project for that. We'll do something outside, whether it's some snow seeding or something in that regard. We are going to, in February, try to get some buckthorn cleaned out in the McCarran's property near Villa. We have some seeding at Villa and Reservoir in March, some rain garden cleanup at Lexington. And then obviously in May, we have our flower planting like we usually do during that event. And then we're still identifying the rest of the year and some additional things we're kind of planning. One of them I'll talk about a little later moving forward. So with that, I can answer any questions.
Oh, I have a question. Can I go ahead? Will you be seeding? I think it said there one of your activities is seeding at Villa Park and Reservoir. What kinds of seeds? Sorry, I live right by those places.
We do a native seed mix. We found, and it's kind of unique and new to how we work with Stantec and us. We do a lot of snow seeding during the winter. It's not something that used to be done a whole lot, but Paul, our ecologist, has really kind of come through and that's the process we've been using, and we're seeing good results from it. There's lots of areas that we've snow seeded the last couple of years that you're starting to see it really come through, but it's usually a mix of wildflowers and other native seeds.
Sorry, just another follow-up on that one. That When you say snow seeding, just out of curiosity, because we're doing a lot of seeding on our own yard here too with native plants, do you just put the seeds right over the snow, or do you have to
Yeah.
dig up the snow and put it
So
in the snow?
our volunteers will get big bags. We have big seed bags, and you basically walk and you broadcast seed, kind of hand broadcast seed as you're walking along. And a lot of the things that will germinate either through sitting there. Some of them germinate after they're eaten by some animals, and I think you know where I'm going. So we've had we have really good results with it. So yeah, it's all done by hand with volunteers. We do coverage areas, so everybody's kind of in different spots. It works out really well.
Neat, thanks.
Question on the Martin Luther King Day event. Would you have enough content, I guess I'd say, to consider holding that virtually if need be? I've been to the last couple of them, and it is quite an informative day, but I understand this year was a challenge itself, and then that, 'cause I guess for me, that is a very interesting day.
Yeah, I don't think so. Say we weren't able to do it that day, doesn't mean we're not going to have that event when we can. It's an option to do it virtually. It's something Rachel and I have talked a little bit about, and I've talked with Matt and Lonnie about it. I'm not sure if it would go over as well in a virtual setting. So that's why we're kind of debating on doing a service project that day instead, and coming back to the informational meeting when we're able to kind of get back together. But it's certainly an option. As we kind of get in the next week or so, we'll need to make a decision and kind of decide what we're going to do that day.
Thank you. Any other questions?
We do still have Bill is here. I don't know if he's got anything to add. If we wanted to kind of bring him in and see.
While we are waiting for Bill, I just wanted to say thank you. As always, I say I do nothing, volunteers do everything. And they were incredible this year. As you can see from the numbers, in some events we had fewer volunteers, but they actually contributed more hours, which was outstanding. And then also thank you to Park and Rec leadership. I did push on some of these activities, and they were incredibly gracious in working with me and making sure that we were able to have volunteers and kept them safe. So I very much appreciate that. And snow seeding is my favorite natural activity. So it is the best.
Good evening, Bill. Do you have anything to add to anything we talked about?
Well, the apple butter was great.
Thank you. Thank Rachel and Patty. They made it.
That was good stuff. We've done a lot of cutting of buckthorn, and it took a long time, but it finally got chipped up by, I don't know who did it, if it was Stantec or if the city did it, but places where all that buckthorn was sitting is very open and easy to get around, and it looks good. But there's always more buckthorn.